And sometimes, history is not written in years or decades. It is written in a single moment, a speech, a strike, a silence that follows. Today we are looking at the final moments surrounding one of the most powerful figures in the Middle East, Iran's supreme leader, and the speech he gave just before reports claimed he was killed in a massive wave of strikes. This is not just a story about one man. It is about power, conflict, and a region standing on the edge of something far bigger. In the hours leading up to the reported attack, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, addressed his nation, a figure who had ruled for decades, shaping Iran's political, military, and ideological direction, speaking at a time when tensions were already at a breaking point. His words came in the middle of rising pressure from the United States and Israel, as accusations, threats, and military positioning had been escalating for weeks. To understand the weight of that speech, you need to understand who he was. For more than 3 decades, the supreme leader was the highest authority in Iran, not just a political leader, but the central force behind the country's decisions. From military strategy to foreign policy, from internal security to ideological direction, his influence touched every corner of the system. And now, according to emerging reports, that voice has been silenced. The context leading to this moment is critical. The United States and Israel had intensified their stance against Iran, citing security threats and concerns over nuclear development. Military activity had increased. Intelligence operations had reportedly been tracking key locations. The atmosphere was no longer just tense, it was volatile. Then came the strikes. According to initial reports, coordinated attacks targeted key locations inside Iran, including what was described as a compound associated with the supreme leader. These strikes were described as precise, heavy, and strategically timed. Some officials have claimed that multiple high-ranking figures were present at the time, including military commanders and nuclear officials. But here we must pause, because while these claims are spreading rapidly, full independent confirmation from major global authorities remains unclear. And in moments like this, clarity is often the first casualty. Still, the impact of the reports was immediate. Iranian state media, after initial denial, later indicated that the 86-year-old leader had been killed. International outlets began citing officials and sources suggesting the same. Israeli leadership publicly stated that he was no longer alive. The narrative shifted from speculation to a developing global crisis. At the same time, the United States framed the strikes as necessary. Statements described the operation as an effort to eliminate a threat and reshape the situation in the region. There were calls directed at the Iranian people, urging them to take control of their future once the conflict subsides. But on the other side, the response was immediate and fierce. Iran described the strikes as unprovoked and illegal, and then came retaliation. Missiles were launched towards Israel, sirens sounded across cities, civilians rushed into shelters, explosions echoed across the region. Reports also indicated strikes extending towards Gulf areas hosting U.S. forces. The conflict was no longer contained within one country, it had spread. Eyewitness footage showed destruction, buildings damaged, panic on the streets. In one reported incident, a school in southern Iran was hit, with claims of significant casualties. But even here, numbers remain uncertain and verification is ongoing.
At sea, tensions escalated further. Strikes were reported near U.S. military positions. The possibility of direct confrontation between Iranian and American forces became real. Yet at the same time, official statements suggested that U.S. casualties had not been confirmed. This is what makes the situation so dangerous. There are facts, there are claims, and there is a gap between them filled with uncertainty. And in that uncertainty, decisions are being made. Experts have described this moment as a gamble, not just for one country, but for all sides involved. For the United States, the risk includes political consequences at home, especially if the conflict leads to casualties or prolonged engagement. Questions are already being raised about the decision-making process and the role of Congress. For Israel, the risk lies in the unknown scale of Iran's response. While initial impacts may appear limited, the potential for escalation remains high. Iran has capabilities, alliances, and influence across the region. And for Iran, the stakes may be the highest. Because the reported loss of a supreme leader is not just a leadership crisis, it is a test of the entire system. The question becomes whether the structure holds or fractures. And history tells us something important here. Removing a powerful leader does not always weaken a nation. Sometimes it unites it. Sometimes it fuels resistance. Sometimes it turns conflict into something deeper, more emotional, more difficult to resolve. At the same time, the global reaction is unfolding. Leaders around the world are watching carefully. Some are calling for restraint. Others are condemning the actions. There are concerns about international law, about escalation, and about the precedent being set. Because targeting a head of state or a figure of that level crosses a line that has long been avoided, even in times of conflict. If this becomes acceptable, the rules change. And when the rules change, the world becomes more unpredictable. There's also the economic dimension. The Middle East is central to global energy supply. Any prolonged conflict in this region risks disrupting oil flow, affecting prices, and impacting economies worldwide. What happens here does not stay here, it spreads. And that brings us back to the speech, the final address. Because in moments like these, words matter. They carry weight. They reflect intent. They reveal mindset. And sometimes they become the last message before everything changes. We may never fully understand what was known, what was expected, or what was planned in those final hours. But we do know this. The world after this moment will not be the same as the world before it. Right now, the situation is still developing, information is incomplete, emotions are high, and the risk of escalation remains very real. This is not just a conflict, it is a turning point. And as we watch it unfold, one question remains, not about what has already happened, but about what comes next. Because in a region where history runs deep and tensions run deeper, the next move could change everything.